Imagine 700 Viking ships stretching so far across the Seine River that you cannot see where they end. That is what the defenders of Paris woke up to on the morning of November 25th, 885. 30,000 Norse warriors, their dragon-proud Viking ships packed hull to hull, their war cries echoing off the water, their axes already hungry. Inside the city walls, a garrison of fewer than 200 soldiers stared out at them. 150 to 1. Those were the odds. This is the Viking Siege of Paris, which the French defended successfully in one of the most dramatic, forgotten, and consequential episodes of the entire Viking Age. This era of history changed the trajectory of France, ultimately shattered the Frankish Empire, and revealed to all of Europe just how catastrophically the age of Charlemagne had collapsed. To understand why 30,000 Norsemen appeared outside Paris, you have to understand what the Viking Age had already done to the known world. These were not the first Viking raids on Frankish soil. For decades, Norse warriors had been cutting like blades through the soft underbelly of Christian Europe. They had raided the monasteries of Ireland and England. They had penetrated the Mediterranean, undertaking the siege of Seville in 844 and terrorizing the coasts of Spain in raids that sent shockwaves through every court from Toledo to Constantinople. The Byzantine Empire, watching Norse power from the east, was already recruiting the most fearsome of these warriors into its legendary Varangian Guard, the elite shock infantry that would serve Byzantine emperors for centuries. Vikings in Spain, Vikings on the Volga, Vikings at the gates of Constantinople. This was not a raiding party. This was a civilizational force, and it was running out of soft targets. The Frankish Empire that Charlemagne had built was by 885 a ruin of itself. His grandsons had carved it into bleeding pieces at the Treaty of Verdun in 843. The West Frankish king, Charles the Fat, was a man so spectacularly unsuited to medieval warfare that historians have struggled to find charitable words for him. He was the nominal overlord of Paris, but he was far away, and the Vikings knew it. They had learned, through decades of Viking attacks on Paris and deeper Frankish territories, that the empire's political fractures made it nearly impossible to mount a coherent military response. Panic spread faster than cavalry in the Dark Ages history of Frankish collapse. The Norsemen had mastered the psychology of that panic. Paris in 885 was not the sprawling city it would later become. It was an island fortress connected to both riverbanks by 2 bridges. Those bridges were the tactical key to everything. Control the bridges, and you controlled movement up the Seine into the Frankish heartland. The man who grasped this with absolute clarity was Odo, Count of Paris, one of the great medieval commanders of his time. Odo was not the king. He was not even the most powerful lord in France, but he was present, he was iron-disciplined, and when the Norse fleet materialized out of the autumn fog, he was already on the walls. The Norsemen, led by a warlord named Sigfrid, opened negotiations in the style of the Viking Age, a demand for tribute and free passage upriver. Odo refused. What followed was 33 weeks of siege warfare that would test every dimension of medieval fortification, garrison morale, and human endurance. The first major assault came on November 26th, the morning after the fleet arrived. Thousands of warriors launched a coordinated attack against the bridges and the fortified towers Odo had reinforced. The tactical logic was simple and overwhelming. Flood the defenders with sheer numbers, collapse the fortifications by weight of charge alone, and let the discipline of shock infantry do the rest. Except it failed. The defenders used archers to rain arrows down on attackers crowded onto the narrow bridge approaches. Cauldrons of boiling pitch and oil were poured onto warriors attempting to scale the walls. The garrison, though outnumbered, held the bridge tower through a day of continuous assault that cost the Norsemen hundreds of dead. The psychological warfare was relentless. The Norsemen tried fire ships, floating burning hulks downriver toward the bridges in the hope that the flames would do what their warriors could not. They tried catapults and siege engines, dragging their vessels overland in places to bypass obstacles, displaying a tactical flexibility that lesser commanders would not have managed. Siegfried understood that brute force was failing and that time was now his weapon. A siege became a war of attrition, and the arithmetic of exhaustion favored the besiegers. Inside the fortress, Odo's garrison was fighting through starvation, disease, and the grinding psychological weight of abandonment. Messengers had been sent to Charles the Fat, pleading for a relief army. Month after month, nothing came. The soldiers who had held the wall through wave after wave of Viking attack were now watching their comrades die, not from weapons, but from famine. Morale in any garrison is a fortress of its own. Once it crumbles, no physical wall can compensate. And Odo understood this. He moved among his soldiers the way the great medieval commanders always did, visible, defiant, refusing to let desperation become surrender. The faith dimension of this siege cannot be understated. The Bishop of Paris, Goslin, fought alongside the soldiers on the walls, rallying defenders with the conviction that Paris was not merely a city, but a Christian fortress against pagan invasion. When Goslin died of disease during the siege, his death was a blow that threatened to crack the garrison's spirit. Odo responded by personally leading a mounted breakout through Norse lines to seek reinforcements, a charge through an encircling army that became legendary in its own right. Charles the Fat finally arrived in the autumn of 886. What he did with a massive relief army has puzzled historians ever since. Rather than attacking the Norse encampment, rather than crushing a besieging force that had been weakened and demoralized by nearly a year of failed siege warfare, Charles negotiated. He paid tribute. He granted the Norsemen safe passage to raid Burgundy, a region that had rebelled against him, essentially using the Viking army as a mercenary tool against his own subjects. The garrison of Paris, which had bled for 10 months to hold those walls, watched in disbelief as the empire that had abandoned them now rewarded the men who had come to destroy them. The political consequences were immediate and terminal for Charles. He was deposed within a year, his authority shredded by the contempt of his own nobility. Odo, the man who had actually defended Paris, was elected king of the West Franks, a revolutionary act that shattered the Carolingian monopoly on Frankish kingship and set France on the path toward a new feudal order. The Viking Siege of Paris did not just test a city's walls, it destroyed a dynasty's legitimacy. For the Norse warriors themselves, the siege was a strategic revelation of mixed lessons. The Frankish Empire was too divided to mount a united defense, but individual fortifications commanded by capable leaders could bleed an invading army indefinitely. And within 2 generations, a Viking warlord named Rollo would be granted the territory that became Normandy. The Norsemen settling into the land they had spent a century raiding, their descendants eventually launching their own crusader campaigns across Europe and the Mediterranean. The Battle of Paris endures as one of the defining engagements of medieval warfare, proof that 200 disciplined soldiers, led by a commander who refused to yield, could hold together at their most dire hour. Odo held, the bridges held, Paris held, and afterward, France was never the same.